Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to this first video in a series on Python, particularly Python for data professionals. So mainly I'm going to be teaching Python, which could be Python for anyone, but we're going to be using tools specific for data professionals, specifically in the realm of Anaconda. So let's talk about the whole setup. So this video is all about setting up Python if you don't have Python already. Okay, so Python is a programming language, and it's a very sort of easy to read, easy to understand programming language relative to other languages. Okay, programming is always a skill that takes some time and effort to develop, but totally doable. Now, Python, the Python ecosystem, that means all the tools and practices around Python, generally start with getting Python installed on your computer. Now, there are two ways to install Python that I want to point out. One, you can install Python by going to python.org and downloading the newest Python. I personally like to use pyenv to install Python because this allows you to install multiple versions of Python and be able to switch between them seamlessly. So I oftentimes use this. And come to think of it, I think sometimes if you install Anaconda, I think it might also install Python. I'm not 100% sure on that one. I would still probably install one of these two first and then install Anaconda. Now, Anaconda provides you a set of tools for working with Python, specifically in the data space. The Anaconda company also offers all sorts of other services that I'm less familiar with, so you can read their website to learn more about that. Not my area of expertise, but the idea is that when you're working with Python, you need a way to download packages, meaning third-party tooling, things like pandas, polars, Jupyter Notebook, all these like third-party tools that you can download. In plain Python, and just a plain vanilla install of Python, you can use a tool called pip. Okay, and I love using pip. But oftentimes in the data world, Anaconda provides a way of downloading packages that gives you a repository of sort of specifically data-related packages. Okay, you could use either, but we're going to focus on Conda just because it is sort of a very typically used in the data space. So you're going to want to install all three of these things. Okay, and once you've done that, you're good to go. So if you want, pause the video and then come back to me after you've done that. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Visual Studio Code. So if you don't have Visual Studio Code, you can go to code.visualstudio.com and download it. This is going to be sort of the tool I'm going to use to initially write Python code. Okay, eventually we'll move back to the browser, but I'm going to first open up my Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to do this directly in the repo I have for all the resources I have for this channel. Okay, so I'm going to So essentially I have opened up this folder. Again, you could just open up a blank folder. I'm going to close all these other files that I have open. And I'm going to create a folder for Intro to Python. Okay, I am going to create a couple files. I'm going to create a new file, a readme.md in here. This is where I'm going to put some of the stuff that we'll talk about. So that way if you want to reference some of the commands that I'm going to say we should do, you can see it in there. Okay, and then I'm just going to create a new file called scratch.py just to kind of show you how, before we introduce Notebook, how Python works in general. So in general, you can create files called scratch or called anything .py. So .py is the file extension for Python. Now here in VS Code, you can access your shell. So I'm just clear this out by clicking on terminal and saying, hey, I want a new terminal, and you'll get this little screen down here. This is your computer's shell environment. It's not specific to VS Code. If you're not familiar with shell, it's just your general computer shell environment that I could access by also opening up my terminal. Okay, same thing either way. Okay, now in this case, what I can do is that if I have a file, scratch.py, that has Python code in it, so the most fundamental thing you want to learn in Python is just how to print text to the shell environment. So it's just literally a function called print. So literally I just type the word print and I put parentheses. Print is one example of a function. Anytime you use a function, it has to be followed with parentheses. Okay, so that's me using the function. The parentheses allows me to give information to the function to do whatever it does. In this case, print is going to print text to the screen. So in quotation marks, I need to provide it that text to put into the screen. So typically you do like, hello world. So why not? Let's do that. So essentially what's going to happen is that I'm going to want to run this code. And then the Python interpreter, that's the software you installed, is going to begin reading the first line and then running the code line by line. So in this case, the way to do that is, for one, I want to make sure that my terminal is in the right folder. So again, See, you can see here scratch.py is in this intro with the py folder. Am I in that folder? I can do ls, which actually pwd, which will print the folder that you're in. And I'm actually in the data lessons folder. So I'm one folder above. Okay, I need to get to that folder. So I'm going to type cd intro to Python. Okay, so there I'm going to cd, which stands for change directories. So I'm going to change directories into that folder. And you can see that my prompt change, signifying that I actually changed into that folder. Okay, so now that I'm in that folder, I can type in Python. That's the command to run the file. Okay, so Python and then the name of the file, scratch.py. Hello world, and see, it does exactly what I said. So that's all it is. Okay, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're just taking files with Python code that we wrote, and then we're just going to ask the Python interpreter to go run that code. Okay, so it's just a matter of learning how to write that code, right? Okay, now there are different environments where you can run the code. So typically you could write files and then run those files, but oftentimes in the data space, we use a thing called a notebook. A notebook allows you to sort of write code in a more interactive way. I mean, technically what it's doing is creating like a web server and then giving you this sort of website where you can kind of systematically run Python code. It's actually really neat. But let's go set that up. So in this case, the first thing you always want to do when you're creating sort of like a new Python world, because generally for every project, you want to create what's called an environment. And an environment allows you to isolate the tools you use for that specific project. Because oftentimes we don't want to just download all the tools in one place, because then it makes it harder for us to share our projects with other people, because they won't know specifically which things they need to download. So we generally isolate things in Python by creating environments. And each environment, we would then install the tools we need for that specific project. So just in normal Python, I could create an environment by doing like python -m venv venv. That's how you would create it. I have articles on my blog that talk about this. I'm not going to get into it. I'm going to use Conda for this. So in Conda, when you want to create a new environment, you do Conda create -m, and we're going to give my environment a name. So we'll just call it my environment. And then we say, hey, which Python version do we want? Okay, I'm going to want to use Python 3.11. Let's see if it lets me use that. Okay, and that's what that's going to do is make sure that it's going to create Conda is going to create an environment in which I am using Python 3.11. Okay, so Conda value target prefix is the base prefix boarding. Okay, cool. Oh, actually, I think that's supposed to be n for new. Try that again. Okay, yep, there it goes. So see, I'm creating a new environment. The N is for a new environment. It's creating all the stuff. Let's see here what it says here. I think it's just telling me what's downloading. So warning, a newer version of Conda exists. Okay, current version, latest version. So yeah, I have a pretty old version of Conda. I should probably update that. Please update Conda by running. Let's actually do that first. So I'm gonna run that. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to say, no, don't proceed. I'm going to update Conda, make sure that I'm up to date. Okay, so that'll update Conda. Just always good to read your terminal output, because oftentimes people just put in commands, run it, and then when things don't work out, they're just like, why? Without reading the output. The output oftentimes will give you a lot of information if you bother to read it. Okay, so I'm going to give that a second. Oh, looks like it already might be done. Good. Okay, it's doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video while that installs. Okay, so that installed pretty quick. So I'll just double check that it updated. Conda -- version. Okay, so let me actually restart my terminal, see if that'll fix it. Now, another trick you can do to open your terminal to the folder that you want, you can right-click the file you want to open, and then just say, basically open an integrated terminal. And that's going to open to you to the folder where that file is in. So see, I'm already there now. Okay, awesome. Okay, so now what I can do is I can run that command again. Actually, first let me run the version command. Okay, still says 4.10.3. Not going to worry about it. Okay. So let's do this. Create my environment. And I can see that it's installing the things that I want. So I see there's pip, there's Python 3.11. This is basically the stuff that it's installing in that environment that's being isolated from other environments on my computer. I'll just say yes. I want this environment. So it's setting everything up. Okay, so it's installing all the things. Okay, and then once it's done, good. So now anytime I want to activate that specific environment, I can just do Conda activate, and I put the name of my environment, which was my env. So now it's going to be activated. Okay. Let's, says this command not found error. Your shell has not been properly configured to use conda activate to initialize your shell run. Okay, so it wants me to run conda init first. Okay. Okay. And then I will do conda activate my env. Oh, I see. It's conda init bash. Or in this case, I'm in Zush. Conda init Zush, because I forgot I don't have conda configured for my Zush. There we go. Reopen your current shell. Okay. Boop. There we go. Let's just see if that did that. Yeah, still. Okay, but let's do conda activate my env. And there we go. Okay, so we're good. And see, now you know that you're in the right environment because you see here, I'm in my my env environment, no longer my base environment, which is basically just my computer as a whole. Okay, perfect. So now I am inside my environment and I can begin working. So first thing we want to do is install Jupyter. So conda install Jupyter. Okay. So that's going to install that package. So it's installing it to that specific environment. So if I were to deactivate the environment later, I would no longer have access to it in my base environment. So again, everything is environment specific. Okay, so I'm installing it specifically to the current active environment. Okay, and then after that's done installing, let that install. Okay. I will pause this while that finishes up installing. Okay, so that's finished installing, and now I also want to do conda install Jupyter Lab. Oops. Jupyter Lab. Okay. And now while that finishes, okay, I will pause again. Oh, already installed. Perfect. And now all we have to do is launch Jupyter. Okay. And what we do is we type in Jupyter Lab. Okay. And now we have a server that's just started in a browser window. So a browser window probably popped up for you when you did that. Mine's on my other screen, so I'm going to bring it up over here. And basically here is a Jupyter environment. Okay, so now what I can do is I can create a new file. So I'm going to do that inside my intro to Python folder. Okay, so we'll say here, create a new file and call, well, I want a new notebook file. Actually, let's click here on the plus button. There we go. I want to create a new one of these, and we'll rename it. Rename intro to Python. And there we go. We have a notebook environment. And now what I can do is I can print hello world from here. And essentially these cells allow me to write Python code, and I can run that Python code by just hitting this play button, and I get the output right there. Okay, and this is oftentimes used to be able to kind of replicate and adjust calculations when you're doing analytics. So we're going to use this as our environment to sort of learn Python. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. Have a good one.